everyone, and welcome to another
Sorry about
that. So, it's okay. I was like, we'll go. It's fine. Hi everyone, welcome to another Lads on Tour. It is a bi-weekly Twitch show where we've all come together to talk about things that have always been on our sort of list of shame. The kind of things that when you tell people that you haven't seen them or watched them or played them, they kind of go, what? You've never done this? And so we want to kind of destigmatize that shame and basically use this as a great excuse to get together, a group of pals, not just us four, but also you at home, dig through these piles of shame, and it's a great excuse to finally play, watch, and listen to all these things. So, this week, we're going to be talking about The Exorcist. So if you're watching live along on Twitch, get in the chat. You know, we will be responding and like chatting with you as we chat amongst each other. If you can't make the VOD, we are also putting this on YouTube and podcast services. We have links below, but it's basically Lads on Tour on YouTube and Lads on Tour crew everywhere else. So that's that all out of the way. Let's introduce all of us who are going to be talking about The Exorcist today. So I'm Lucy James, host of today's episode, host of Pazuzu. We also have Zach Ryan. I put you down as the concerned parent, the concerned mother, who's
Reagan.
Also a movie star. Tamoor Hussein. Oh, Demi.
Oh,
Please.
Demi, why you do this?
Oh, Demi.
Oh, Demi. And obviously, Father Marin himself, Jake Decker.
So last time I had the box to celebrate Metal Gear. This time I have some green goo that I will vomit at some point during this episode.
Okay.
Just to keep everyone on their toes to be ready.
I thought you were gonna put on one of those like collars, the
The priest collars.
Priest collars.
No,
I was like,
I didn't know
damn.
I was gonna be the priest. I was just like, I'm gonna throw up green goo. So,
Projectile vomit.
It'll happen. Just wait for it.
Stay tuned for some part during this episode when Jake masturbates with a crucifix. So.
Oh,
Okay, I didn't say
I
that.
completely forgot about that scene, by the way, until I was watching it yesterday. Oh God. But anyway, let's talk a little bit to kick off with what our experience with The Exorcist is. If you've ever seen it before, if you've even read the book, or if this was your first time. Tam, I'll go to you first.
I've seen the movie before. I saw it a long time ago. It's one of those movies. I think one viewing is enough for most people. Like it's not because it's like a shit movie or anything, but like every part of it makes such a deep impression that you develop and you maintain quite a vivid memory of it. So I've never felt compelled to rewatch it just because I can close my eyes and remember most of the scenes or most of how it made me feel. I've never read the book, but I grew up around the kind of, or when the kind of the urban legends around the movie were still quite prevalent. I think they've probably faded out since then. So I'm fascinated to know if people in other parts of the world that are watching, or people who might be younger now, have that same kind of thing. But it was one of those movies that was like, you were scared to watch it, and
Maria asked, did the power of Christ not compel you, Tam?
No, as a Muslim, that shit don't work on me one bit. No, of course Christ does exist in the Islam, but we're not.
That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, he's just a celebrity. He's not an influencer in our religion.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jake, what about you?
I think this was one that I had on my list of shame. So I hadn't seen The Exorcist. Obviously, I've heard a ton about it over the years. I had seen many of the scenes, whether that's in film school or just online or whatever it might be. I remember being pretty scared of this movie as a kid, even though I hadn't seen it, just the thought of it and hearing about it. And I think growing up, going to Christian schools, going to Catholic school, religious horror freaked me out. And I was telling Callie last night while we were watching it, I was like, yeah, I had a 9th grade religion teacher who said this shit's real.
Oh my God.
was like, yeah, exorcism, that's the real deal. Like the priests who handle that are like, they've seen some real shit. And I was like, this shit scared me. This shit really scared me. seeing it now, not so much, but I think the idea over the years has frightened me, and it felt kind of nice not
Yeah.
only to cross this off the list, but to like confront a fear that I had growing up and being like, okay, I can still appreciate the horror elements, but like I wasn't quaking in my boots. Although when I went to bed, turned off all the lights, got under the covers, I was like, I'm a little freaked out. I'm a
Sure.
little freaked
Really?
out. But
Sure.
then I fell asleep. So, you know, it didn't keep me up. I was like
Right.
passed out, didn't have any nightmares, woke up, made breakfast, played Pokemon, forgot about it.
That's good. But also, a ninth grade teacher kind of in a religious school doing that is
Yeah, that's an abuse of
wild.
power.
That is wild. We'll
I've
revisit that.
got some wild stories about religion teachers over the years that we don't need. Well, actually, you know, they might come up throughout this episode, but
Yeah, well, we brought
that
them
was
on as
one.
special guests. We've got all your old teachers.
All of your religious teachers are here today, Jake.
Take off my mask.
Oh,
Zach, what
God.
about you?
So I think The Exorcist is a film that sort of transcends its celluloid boundaries, right? Like it's a movie that is so deeply ingrained with pop culture, and especially like growing up a Simpsons fan, like there's so many references to The Exorcist across so many different shows and movies and et cetera, et cetera. And so like for a long time, I had just thought that I had seen this film as a kid. Like I just thought that I had seen it for a really long time. And then a couple of years ago, a horror podcast that I listen to occasionally did an episode about The Exorcist, and I was like, wait a minute, have I not actually seen it? So I watched it for the first time a couple of years ago and have since watched it. I've watched it twice, and yeah, I just what a movie. Like what a fucking interesting movie this is. So yeah, that's my experience with it.
Yeah.
And I went to Catholic school when I was a kid.
So you live The Exorcist.
That's right.
God, the bit where, I mean, we'll talk about the plot of the movie in a little bit, but like I had a real sort of visceral reaction to when Demi is doing, like Father Karras is doing his mother's funeral, and the fact that the church and like the rich redness and the robes that they're all wearing, and I was like, oh my God, it just yeah. And like I grew up never particularly religious. I went to a Catholic school just because it was like the quote unquote best one that my parents could send me to in the area. It was still pretty shit, but like, you know, that kind of examination of the Catholic Church was the thing that freaked me out the most. Like similar to Jake, like you know, you're in Catholicism, you're kind of free. Marie is exactly right. Is this just going to be group therapy about Catholic?
Pretty much,
trauma?
yeah.
I also wanted to shout out 34T Man for abbreviating Jesus Christ as J Sizzle, which I really like.
I was gonna say one of the more horrific things in this movie though was I forgot during mass, or there's that scene where he's like consecrating the blood and the blood of Christ, and he's like breaking the geez, I don't remember any of this stuff because I haven't been
body
to
of Christ,
mass for
yeah.
but I remembered how they all in Catholicism they usually share the same glass
Yes.
for wine when they
Yeah.
pass around, and I was like, at the time I was kind of like, oh, that doesn't seem very sanitary. Now
Yeah, no, but also like
I think they've worked out other ways now because of
hope so.
COVID, but still, I was
Everybody
like,
gets their
oh,
own individual little sip, like a little
Does
tiny
everyone get like a little
glass.
shot glass
Just like,
of the blood of Christ? But also like the let's not go on a huge tangent about
I
Catholic
mean,
school, but I always remember the thing that freaked me out was
too
the fact
late.
that they placed the body of Christ in your mouth. Anyway, I watched it as a kid because
That's fucked.
And I think I've said this before. I used to go to my granddad's house after school every night, and on a Friday I used to stay over, and my granddad would go to the pub, and I would just watch whatever was on TV. And so I saw The Exorcist probably when I was about 9-ish, so not too bad. And then I watched it again a couple of years ago, and I watched it again yesterday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, which really makes the film hit different, to be honest. So, fantastic movie, still holds up. Jake, you're the newbie here. Can you give us a little plot synopsis? You don't have to go too deep.
yeah. I mean,
Oh, but wait, actually, sorry, just before I get you, if you are in the chat, let us know if you did your homework, what your experience with it has been. We'll kind of bring those back in a little bit too. Jake, sorry.
so a young girl named Regan gets possessed by a demon or the devil or something.
Pazuzu,
And
my dude.
Pazuzu'd.
Pazuzu.
Pazuzu'd. They try to figure out what it is. They go to the doctor, psychiatrist.
So, like we skipped a big bit here. This is something that Zach and I talked about yesterday. I
Okay.
forgot it starts in Iraq or
It
like
does, yeah. And
so the first thing you hear is the Muslim call to prayer in this movie. Firstly, shout out to the Exorcist, or shout out, but like fuck the blaming, just casually blaming that on Muslims. You know, just see it.
Shade,
So
bro.
there's something that I would love for us to discuss, kind of ongoing, which is the actual mechanical nature of the possession, because that's something I'm not 100% on, if you get what I mean. Like the
You talk
whole
about like how she gets possessed.
yeah, the whole like
Wait.
the little the little figure and Father Merrin and that kind of stuff, like that part of it.
so
I'm not
more,
yeah.
I want to derail this a little. Haven't you told me that you've experienced shit like
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you
So
want to talk about that at some point,
yeah,
or if
so
you
like
kind of want to keep it to yourself.
so like for my personal experience, obviously the idea of possession and exorcisms and that kind of stuff, the stuff that you were saying that your teachers were telling you is very real in some South Asian culture. Muslims and Islam believe in jinns and demons and angels and that kind of stuff, and also the ability to possess demons and or be possessed by them, and as a result exorcisms. So, and also like by extension stuff like voodoo and like black magic and so for me, like my personal experience, so growing up, I always heard stories about possessions and that kind of stuff. So I know before I had even seen The Exorcist, my various family members told me that they had been to or seen an exorcism happen. And the stuff that they described, I later saw in The Exorcist, which gave it some legitimacy back and forth. So the whole speaking in tongues, my grandfather claims that there was a young girl who was possessed in like the village that they lived in, and one of the reasons that they said that she was possessed is because she was born in that village, wasn't particularly smart, or wasn't particularly showered with opportunities, didn't go to school, but she at one point was speaking other languages fluently, and was also like speaking in tongues and that kind of stuff. Like, who knows if any of this is true, but that was the whole thing. And also my grandfather claims to have met a witch in a forest. For me personally, I went to Pakistan a few years back, and it was a time where it's interesting. It kind of fits into the kind of psychological stress element of this movie, because obviously there's always a thing where it's like, is it possession, or is it this kid is going through a traumatic life experience with the mother and the father and that kind of stuff, and is that impacting it? So for me, I went to Pakistan when there was an ongoing major dispute between various members of my family, including my grandfather's side and his brothers, and there was land involved, and I was to inherit some of that land, and so was my dad, and so there was a lot of like tension there. So when I went over, there was like some really like intense family rivalry and fighting. And when I got there, I got deathly sick almost immediately, like really badly sick, like to the point where eventually I was hospitalized. But one of the things that at one point happened was people were convinced that a curse had been put on me, because obviously I was supposed to be the beneficiary of some of this land and that kind of stuff. And it was believed that other members of the family who had some history in like screwing around with black magic had put a curse on me. And like I was delirious, feverish, and I passed out. And then one day, like it was night, and I woke up, and like there was a circle of people around me. It was very dark. It was like backlit. There was like a roaring fire coming out of a like an oven that we had in our garden area, and like they were like kind of standing there and quietly whispering prayers over me, and they like placed various like items on me, like different things on me that I guess was supposed to be like the receptacle for the curse. And like I was obviously deliriously sick, like coming in and out, but I definitely saw what I saw. Like those people were there, and I knew because they were members of my family, so I recognized them. And I talked to them about it yesterday, and they explained that they were lifting the curse, and like they prayed and that kind of stuff. And eventually, they took all the stuff that was on me and like threw it, cast it into a fire, and that was their way of like exercising me to a degree. And say what you will about it, but like I woke up the next day absolutely fine, and it was very, very weird. And I had been to the hospital as well by then, and the doctors were like, "We just don't get it. It's like." We can't. There's nothing that should cause this, and it was like, oh, maybe he ate or drank something, and I was very careful about not eating anything that was properly cooked in our house, and like the water I drank was boiled and filtered and everything, so it didn't work, and then that was fine. That's like weird. But yeah, that was my history with it. So like, going back to what we were talking about, I want to keep an.
There it is.
I want to keep the thread on the mechanics of the possession, because it starts with Father Merrin doing like an excavation in like what is some sort of Middle Eastern country, likely Iraq.
So it's Iraq. It is Iraq. They mention it again at the end, and also as a fun side note, a bit of trivia, they had to change the filming crew to be all British because they couldn't take the American film crew to Iraq because of the diplomatic relations between the two countries at the time had obviously disintegrated.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, because I lost track of it, because the whole like the thing that he excavates is later found near the house, and I was just like, is that it? Is that the connection? But yeah, if anyone has any more insight into that, I'd love to hear it.
I think it's purposefully meant to be a bit nebulous.
Vague, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's no specific reason, I don't think, that this particular child. I mean, you could kind of theorize that she's a kid, she's weaker in that regard, and maybe easier to get, and she's got stress, like she's moved, and her dad is a piece of shit.
Plays with a Ouija board.
Also, it plays with a Ouija board, and it could just be this perfect concoction of all this, perfect storm of all this stuff, right?
A perfect Pazuzu storm.
Perfect Pazuzu storm. But Jake, I'll come back to you with because like you said, there is the element of the story which is, girl gets possessed, her mum ropes in these priests to do an exorcism, but there's more to it, because you actually have like the personal connections of the two priests themselves. So you've got Merrin, you see him in Iraq at the beginning, and he has this like situation, he uncovers something and he takes a step back completely. He's like, I've got to go, I've got to leave. But then I think Father Karras's story is particularly well done, because he's talking from a lapsed Catholic here, but like his crisis of faith is something that's very interesting to me. So Jake, what did you make of all that kind of stuff? Because I mean, really, the exorcism doesn't start until it's a 2-hour-long movie. 3/4 of it doesn't even have.
Yeah, it's not till like the last like 30-40 minutes that there's actually exorcism happening.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciated that, because I feel like religious horror exorcism movies have such a rigid structure these days that they follow, and you can tell that a lot of these modern exorcism movies obviously draw from The Exorcist, but a lot of those movies don't spend nearly as much time developing those characters and introducing you to them. And like it almost got to the point in The Exorcist where I was like, okay, I don't know why this scene is here. Like, I feel like this scene could have been cut because I already kind of understand what's going on with these characters. But at the end of the day, I really did appreciate that, and like just really getting like a firm understanding of who these characters are before that moment happens. And I think it makes those final scenes a lot more powerful knowing about those characters. I think in particular, like the main priest, what was his name? Father Karen is
Merrin.
Karras.
Merrin and
Merrin and Karras.
Merrin and Karras.
Dimmy.
I find it really weird or interesting that his name is Damien, considering the other historic horror movie fiction around Damien.
What was first, The Exorcist or
The Omen?
The Omen. I think The Exorcist.
It's probably The Exorcist, yeah.
Oh, Lulu says 2 gets into the demons targeting special people with healing powers, and Reagan is one of them. So that could be a potential.
Oh, I don't like that.
That's kind of like the Shining explanation.
Yeah.
That sounds like. But yeah, the fact that his name is Damien is obviously. I feel like that's more of a wink and a nod than anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I also just really liked the logical pace of it all too. Like, you know, she starts acting weird. They take her to the doctor. Apparently in the director's cut, which I didn't watch, there's a scene where she says some pretty terrible things to the doctor, and it kind of sets off a red flag, and the doctor mentions it like, hey, she said some pretty messed up things. But like, it's just kind of that progression. I did think it was a bit dated how they were like how they were treating psychiatry as a last resort for this.
Yeah.
There was that line where it's like, no, we got to exhaust everything in the medical field or something before we move on to psychiatry. And then there's that really quick scene with the psychiatrist. But
It's
yeah,
also kind of interesting later on there where Father Karras is like, yeah, we used to do this before we discovered mental health. Yeah, wow.
I mean, let's talk about the whole psychiatry thing, because yeah, like you said, it does kind of take a little bit longer than you think they would devote that time to. And actually, in like doing a bunch of research and reading, apparently the scene that a lot of people found the scariest was when she's getting the scan on her head.
Yeah,
and
the
they
blood.
cut- and the blood
Yeah.
spurting out.
That was even I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
kind of nasty. It's just because
seeing
I
a
think
young
that
girl go through that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think the actress like
Linda Blair.
is Linda Blair. Yeah, so
Yeah.
like really amazing in this movie. Like,
She was nominated
so
for
good.
she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress at 12 years old for this role.
Incredible. Like
Well, there
she
was a
so
bunch of
good.
controversy around it though, because after she had been nominated, it came out that she didn't do the voice. It was another actress that did the voice, and people were like, "Well, maybe we shouldn't have nominated her then," because like the whole idea was that she had done this like insane voice, you know. But yeah,
Uncredited. Yeah, that the actress was uncredited, and I think eventually went on to sue Warner Brothers or
Possibly.
attempted to.
Yeah, I mean, like even without the voice, the bits where she's just Reagan and like is either just a child being happy-go-lucky, or at the end or the bits where she's like calling out to her mom to be like, help me,
yeah.
is like genuinely like it sends shivers down my spine like when it was happening, and I'd seen it before and I was like, oh god, please someone help this child, please. But like she was incredible in it. Like I loved her performance.
Boy named Matt has just dropped something in the chat that gonna do a real-time Google on that one. But yeah, part of the reason that scene for me was so scary is because the guy who was like playing the doctor, he felt so authentic, and I looked it up after, and it turns out he was a doctor. And so boy named Matt just said those were real medical assistants, and one was later arrested for murder.
So
What
This movie is kind of cursed too. I don't know if you
Right,
guys looked
yeah.
much into the history.
Yeah, so not as bad as The Omen, which is, you know,
Yeah.
the curse on that movie was
So,
ridiculous.
which,
Yeah,
by the way, we
Exorcist.
should circle back. The Omen was after this. It came out in 1976. What I was gonna say is like one of the things that I think Tam was kind of speaking to, and then like we alluded to with the boy named Matt's note here, is like the thing you got to understand is like William Friedkin, before he made these films, was a documentarian. He made documentary films. So like a lot of, especially his early films, are very, very rooted in documentary style filmmaking. So a lot of the notes that he's taking, a lot of the things, the way that shots are composed, it just the thing that's so unnerving about this movie is like how real it feels, right? Like the thing that is, it's a very different kind of film because there's something sort of tangible about it, and I think it's because Friedkin came from a documentary background.
Yeah.
Like those early shots in Iraq too definitely felt very documentarian. Like those zooms from far away,
Yeah.
like those lingering shots. Like it felt like a 70s documentary or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah, I love that the stuff in the early part of the movie, especially because it feels so different from what you expect. And I think that's why a lot of people forget it. Like we mentioned earlier, like Zach and I were like, oh yeah, it does start there, and it just feels like a different experience, and it goes a long way to establish that sense of realism with having Father Merrin look like he's losing the plot a bit early days. You could say he's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Oh my god.
Boo!
Oh my god.
Boo!
Why are you booing me?
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
But yeah, that stuff is like I really really like it. And I think is it who was it? A boy named Matt says, I always heard she was possessed to lure out the priest. I think that might be right, because I remember thinking, oh, you remember when he's like reversing before they introduced Merrin back in, you can hear her, like when they reverse it, calling for Merrin,
Yeah.
which is why I think that might be right.
That
I don't know
sounds
if that is,
plausible.
yeah. So it sounds plausible, like because it seems like this one demon, devil, whatever it is, has just got a kind of rivalry or like a some sort of relationship with Merrin. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's let's talk a little bit about kind of the unraveling. And I think as well it's important to realize that it's not the kind of just the unraveling of Reagan, the character, but also the mother, like Chris, because, you know, she's clearly like this strong, powerful, like she's a movie star. She has servants in her house, like she has a full staff, and yeah, she's got a shitty ex-husband, and like Reagan's dad he sucks and like doesn't even remember his daughter's birthday. And then she's kind of like the breadwinner, and she's the one who's really pushing, like she's pushing against the doctors when they don't figure out immediately what's wrong with her. She's not happy with their diagnosis. And then she's the one who basically like manages to loop everything in and everyone in. And you know, it's very much, it's not just, you know, about Reagan, but it's about this mother doing the best she can. And so let's talk a little bit about the actress as well. Like Zach, you have a storied history with The Exorcist. What do you make of sort of that relationship and the actress and all that?
I'm sorry, the relationship with Reagan?
Yeah. Between the mum and daughter.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because one thing that I noticed the first time I watched this movie all the way through is like, she obviously cares a lot about Reagan, like that's her kid, but also she still continues to be an actress. Like she still continues to go to work and like be on set. Well, she's like, yeah, actually, also my daughter is possessed, but I'm here, you know. So there's like, it's funny because it's very clearly a movie about possession, but it's also like the subtext is that it's also a movie about divorce, right? And like what that can do to kids. And like, I don't know. I think that there is like an interesting dynamic between the two of them.
I don't know. Me and my mum never wrestled. That was the one thing that really stuck out to me. I was like,
it was a different time, you know, the 70s. So yeah, who knows what they did for fun back then? Not me. I wasn't there. Oh. But yeah, I don't know. I think at the end, the relationship between the two of them is like I don't really get much beyond it outside of like genuine concern, you know, in a motherly way. So
yeah, I think for me, like I'm always trying to figure out what the deal or like the theme is for Chris's character, and like out of all of them, it feels like she just seems she's the least clear to me, if you get what I mean. Like, or what are the factors outside of actual possession that the movie is trying to like lay around each character? And for like, you know, for Reagan, it is the stress of dealing with, you know, the life situation, and you know, Father Merrin has this history, and then Father Karras is like his crisis of faith, and how that manifests in this moment where he needs to show more faith than ever. But like with Chris, it's perhaps a little more unclear to me what it is. And that was something I kept thinking about. Like it could be, and I tried to think like, is it like the influence you have on your child and who you keep around them and that kind of stuff, like the places, because they spend a lot of time with not just her but like the industry, people around the industry, like that party where you have and Burke is someone that comes up quite often, and he's, I don't know, like the thing that I drew try to draw like an AB connection from like Burke being this, you know, Hollywood director, but also incredibly racist, like openly racist around other people. And like, what does that mean that she has a close relationship with Burke, and then, you know, her daughter is aware of Burke at the same time? Is it a case of the movie saying like, be careful who you know, leave around impressionable people, or that kind of stuff? But I don't think I can make a strong enough connection for her to be for her to have like a clear thematic place or like narrative place in the overall. Like for me, she's perhaps the weakest like narrative and characterization part of this movie, even though her actual performance is fantastic and phenomenal. I think it's great. But yeah, I do like her as a character. I'm just not super clear on her role within the thematic exploration of the movie.
I mean, I think Boy Named Matt also brings up a good point. It's like, I don't know, it feels very Shining to me, like the kind of illusions that the director might have been inappropriate with Reagan as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
because
there's a kind of a conversation but not conversation about that, and there is one in The Shining as well. And
Yeah,
it's
'cause
just like never confirmed or anything. It's never really, you don't really dive into it, but it's like it's there to enough to plant the seed in your mind.
yeah, because Kinderman, the cop, asks Chris's character like, would she was
Why
like,
was he alone with her?
yeah, he would have no reason to go up there. But like the fact that he was up there is clearly counter to that, and the fact that the housekeeper or the babysitter or whatever, the maid like bounced as well, does create that kind of the suggestion.
I think that too is kind of one of the reasons why this movie is still so powerful and why I really enjoyed it, is because there was a lot of that in the film, right? There's a lot of questions that aren't answered that you just kind of make, like conclusions you have to make on your own. And I think that also comes back to the fact that, William Friedkin used to direct documentaries, because a lot of times in documentaries, you're not there for the event, you're there recounting the event, you're getting the reactions. And you see that in particular even at the beginning, right? When with the statue in the chapel that was desecrated and stuff, and it was like, who do you think could have done this? And you're thinking like I wonder how this is going to tie into the film. Like I wonder if they're going to explain it, and they kind of don't. But you're kind of supposed to just make those leaps on your own, and I think that's something that a lot of modern horror movie, especially possession films, kind of don't do anymore, because people want to see the shit. They want to see like the worst of it,
Right.
And like, well, that's cool and fun, and I like seeing those movies. There's something almost more terrifying about this film and what you don't see, and that's a similar theme in many horror movies. The less you see, the scarier it is.
Yeah, Boy Named Matt in the chat also points out the line, "Do you know what she did, your swear word daughter?" Which I forgot about until until they just point it out. So I think like that is kind of like, one goes back to the molestation thing, two goes back to what Jake was just saying, where there's often things in this movie that they don't explain, and they leave you to kind of, the things that you don't see are as influential on the narrative as the things you do see.
Well, let's talk then about what we did see. We'll talk about the possession itself and the exorcism. Like, I found it still so very effective, and I think part of it as well is because it's like, it's all practical. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. It's all practical effects. It's like, we'll talk about the vomit in a second, because I think that's the standout, but also like the head turning round, the voice, they're all in harnesses just getting flung around that room, and the way that the camera also like just shakes the whole time, and it just such a feeling of unease. But honestly, it's like, I've seen like the Conjuring movies and I really enjoy them, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like this does,
Right.
And so it's still, and also the fact that you have this build up, and I keep bringing it back to The Shining, but it's like you have these like smaller moments of stress, and then it kind of dies down a bit, and then at the end it's just like a solid 20 minutes.
Yeah, that last like 20-30 minutes of this movie, like they basically have you in a headlock. Like the movie, you can't look away from it for the last half an hour. It's so intense.
I think it really works. I was going to say, I think it really works more effectively, that kind of pacing, especially if you have a kind of frame of reference and context for the urban legend around it, because you come into it expecting the most like heinous shit you've ever seen, and it's got some people saying it's real and that kind of stuff. So the fact that it's not up front or even like peppered throughout in a way that's like paced so that you get a bit and you go on, it really builds that tension, because the longer you don't see something horrible, like obviously horrible, the more tense and the more you apprehend it have eventually happening. And then when it really kicks off, it does not stop. So it is overwhelming. I think like it's a really smart way to kind of negate people's expectations. Even if you know this is fucked up, you're not going to be ready to have half an hour of it just dumped on you.
I feel like too, that stuff ends on the flip of a switch. It's like
Yeah.
I almost was expecting more. Like I was surprised at how quickly they got out of the possession stuff just of the nature of what happened. Like I don't know. Like I almost like when I was done, I was just kind of like, wait, that's it? Like
So this was a major.
I was kind of waiting for like I was expecting, I don't know, some big climactic moment, and there was, to be fair, but like with the possession or like answers to be revealed or something, but it was just like a snap. Just all of a sudden it's over.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
That was like a major criticism of the film when it released too, because the film was kind of released to mixed reviews, and like one of the major criticisms was that it just sort of wraps up really neatly. But I think one of the most interesting things about like film criticism as you get further away from, you know, the 70s, 80s, etc. is like, yeah, the way that the exorcism actually kind of comes to a halt, and there's like, you know, some like brief conclusion, but it's really ambiguous. like the actual ending itself is like, okay, what really happened there? What's going to happen next? And like you mentioned earlier, Jake, like there are so many unanswered questions. Like there are so many things that are not spelled out for the audience that I think like a lot of criticism was lobbed at this movie, towards this movie, because people were like, well, we don't find out what happens. We don't understand the whole picture, which was not really something that like movies did, you know?
Yeah, I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, it's just like, I think knowing all the answers is inherently, like, when it comes to storytelling, I don't want to know all the answers, so I can appreciate like why people would be mad, but it's like, it's why, you know, Lost was so I know, bringing it back to Lost.
Who had 43 minutes in before we mentioned Lost?
Yeah, but it's what kept people coming back, and people still theorize about it, and like look at Yellow Jackets and other horror movies as well, because with stuff, and especially when you're dealing with things like magic and the supernatural and possession, it's better not to have a definitive answer about why all that happened, because then you at home get to fill in the blanks. And like, it's similar with when you see monsters on screen, like your imagination is ultimately more terrifying than anything any creature department could bring to the screen.
Yeah, I think like it works in, I think the decision to not over explain it and end abruptly, like Jake said, it worked back then, and I think it works effectively now. I think back then the decision to do that kind of enhances the fact that, you know, people believed it to be something true. I think if it followed traditional format of beginning, middle, and end, tie up all the loose ends and make it feel like a story, you know, that's, you lose the edge of it, because then it feels like a story, and by its nature a story is something that someone's made up and told to you. And I feel like the fact that it's like not explained and it ends abruptly makes it feel like an incident, if you get what I mean. Like and like it feeds into the idea that, oh, this was something that really happened, this documentarian captured it, and then, you know, people died, and you know, or like the urban legends that worked around it, like it really enhanced that element of it. So back then, I think it was a smart decision. Nowadays, I think we've reached a point where, you know, taste and critique and even format of movie making has matured to the point where it doesn't need to fit in those rigid structures anymore. So the fact that it doesn't wrap up neatly and explain anything means that it feels like a contemporary, modern, like smartly written, mature movie and story. And I think like whether they did that by accident or planned on it, like I think it's worked out incredibly well for it in both time periods, when it was released and now, where you can pick it up and watch it and still feel kind of enchanted by it or like terrified by it in a uniquely Exorcist way.
Shasta Faye points out in the chat
just gonna point that out.
Yeah, we don't understand because the characters don't really understand. It's unknowable, and that's what makes it fun. And I think that's like a perfect way to sum it up.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up.
Well, with that then, let's go and talk about our reactions to it. So, I mean, for me, it's like, I loved it. Again, it's still such a great movie. It holds up so well. Tam and Zach, I assume similar sentiments?
Tam, why don't you go first?
Yeah, for me, like I think it's superb. Like I always, so this is one of the films that I think one of our good friends, Daniel Krupa, who's for me like friend of the show. He's like, for me, if I ever need some sort of guidance on horror movies and that kind of stuff, I go to him. He's like the encyclopedia for me, and like he's the most knowledgeable person. And it's one that I know that he loves and he references a lot. And I hadn't seen it for a really long time, and in my mind, I always felt like, oh, isn't it dated? Like, it's like watching Bram Stoker's Dracula now. Like, you respect it, but you probably you can see through it, and it doesn't quite work. But like his reverence for it has always been super high. So when I came to watch it again, I understood why he maintains that reverence for that movie. Yeah. It's one of those films where whenever I speak to him about it, or whenever he talks about it, he doesn't qualify it with "it sucks now," or like "it's not as great now." It is good now. It still is good now, and it's because it's such a smartly made movie. It feels like one of those perfect films in a lot of ways, and there's so much to like. There's moments that I thought I wouldn't be scared by that are way scarier than anything like the possession stuff. Like the bit where she's like being flung up and down on the bed, like that was one of the most terrifying things for me. And just a bit where Merrin comes into the house and the demon just screams Merrin's name, like that sent chills down me. And the voice, I think, is super a big thing about it that I really find terrifying. But like top to bottom, like it holds up so well. Such a smartly designed, really elegant, and I think it's timeless. Like it's such a timeless movie, and I completely understand why people hold it up. I think it's one of those movies that's easy to just kind of let fade into the annals of history, especially when it comes to movie making and like this genre specifically. But it's one of those ones where if you have an interest in horror or scary movies, like you owe it to yourself to watch it because it still holds up and it is formative in a way that is clearly obvious still now.
Yeah.
Or just filmmaking in general.
Yeah, exactly.
Tam, at the beginning of the episode, you said that, it's a movie that you saw once and then didn't feel like you really needed to see again, right? And I feel the exact opposite. Like, I think this is a tremendously rewatchable film, and I think you notice and learn and glean more about, the character motivations and the subplots and all this other stuff every time you watch it. And like, I don't think we've really talked about the the influence. This movie is like, for all intents and purposes, this is the first modern horror film, right? Like Jaws came out in 1976, 1977 as like a blockbuster horror movie. But this movie came out in 1973. Like maybe Rosemary's Baby, you could make an argument for as like the first modern horror film. But like, this movie kind of set the template for what all horror would be moving forward, even up until today. And like, take a look at this movie and compare it to what I think is probably the second greatest horror film ever created behind this one, which is Hereditary. Like there are so many direct analogies and comparisons from that film to this one. Like Ari Aster is clearly looking at The Exorcist as the playbook to create a film like Hereditary, and it's because this film still holds up today. It's still just as unnerving, it's still just as scary, it's still just as interesting. And yeah, no matter how many times I watch it, because now I've seen it 3 or 4 times, every time I'm still like, there's still that gut check of like, fuck man, like this is a tough watch. And you can't really say that about a lot of movies, especially genre films from the 70s. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot that hold up as well as this film.
Yeah. Mark Kermode is, if you're British, you'll probably know who Mark Kermode is, but he's one of like the leading film critics in the UK, host of an incredibly popular podcast with Simon Mayo. And The Exorcist is his favorite film of all time. And he said that he's seen it 200 times easily. A lot. And he finds new things every single time he watches it. Like, and he, similarly considers it like the playbook. But Jake, this was your first time. So what did you make of it? Did it live up to your expectations?
I don't know. My expectations were kind of skewed, I feel like, because I had seen so many films based off this movie, or like it had clear inspiration from this movie. I mean, like I love the Conjuring films. I love seeing these kind of movies. So seeing it now, like it wasn't as scary as I had expected it to be, and I it's weird because obviously now I wasn't expecting it to be super frightening, but when I was a kid, this movie horrified me, having not seen it. Seeing it now, I still thought it was freaky in its own way. But I think the thing I like the most about this film is just how it treats all of its characters so much better than most horror movies do.
Yeah.
Like I was saying early on, how you get all this backstory, like this really interesting backstory, and how it's the process of discovering that it's an exorcism, or is very natural. Like it makes sense. It's logical. It's not just like acting weird. We got to call in the Conjuring,
The
couple.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, we got to call in the Conjuring couple to set up cameras in our house, and it's a go. Like I appreciated all of that. I think like, yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I think the only thing that kind of came off a bit shocking was just how abrupt that ending was, especially in terms of the possession stuff. Like I expected, for better or worse, I expected Demi to kind of take over and start doing the exorcism on his own, because that is what would happen in modern horror films, right? But that didn't, and it makes sense because he didn't know how to, so he just kind of did it his own way. But even that said, I think I was still expecting a little bit more at the end, and not in a bad way. Like I don't know if I'd say I don't like this movie because of it, but my brain had just been primed to be like, okay, now he's taken over, and now we're gonna see the spirit come out of her body or whatever. But yeah, this movie holds up really well. I really liked it. I definitely would watch it again. I think I want to watch the director's cut and see what's different, because I watched the theatrical apparently.
I love how it flirts with that kind of stuff though. Like there's that bit where Demi's doing the exorcism on her, or where he's losing control and he's like hitting her, and he's like, take me instead. And then you see his eyes for a few seconds like have that same kind of color, and you're like, oh, is it gonna move? And is this the next phase of the movie? And he's like, nope, I'm gonna yeet myself out of this window. And that's exactly what he does.
That moment was great though. I thought when he just kind of lost his nerve, and he was like, he's way in over his head. He doesn't know what to do. So he just like, he's a boxer. So he's like, fuck it. I'm just going to start beating the shit out of this
little girl,
this demon who's a little girl. And like, I thought that made a lot of sense. And that was like, rewarding is probably not the best word, but like that felt narratively rewarding. And then him to just yeet himself out the window after, I thought all made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a cool movie. I really liked it.
Also, like there's something to be said about like, for better or worse, like the actors on this like genuinely put their bodies through some horrible shit. Like there's a bit earlier.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
There were
but,
multiple deaths on set. Like the production was haunted. Like that's
because every time I see that clip of Chris's character falling, I'm like,
we're looking at the B-roll that I'm playing right now is from a mini doc called Raising Hell, filming The Exorcist. That's really interesting because it just talks about like brutal filming conditions. Like, and Friedkin was such a fucking weirdo when it came to direction. Like, he did shit to his actors that like you just couldn't do today. Like, one of my favorite stories. Well, I mean, even more so than like one of my favorite stories is the younger priest. What's his name?
Karras?
Yeah, Karras. So that guy wasn't an actor; he was a playwright, and he got cast in this film because Friedkin knew him through a couple of different people, and he thought he would be good for the role. So, and this guy actually ended up getting a Best Supporting Actor nod for this role. But at one point, Friedkin just shot a starter pistol like by his right by his head unannounced to unnerve him, and like this dude turned around and told him like, "Hey, don't ever do that again. Like, I can't be working like this. You can't just fucking fire guns in my face without telling me." Like, and yeah, he slapped people around on set to get them tilted before scenes and stuff. Like, it was really intense.
Yeah. We'll talk about the kind of facts and other stuff about the filming in a little bit, but I wanted to we kind of flirted with it, and there has been stuff in the chat where it's like you can see how people in the 70s would be terrified of this movie. But let's talk about the reaction to it, because it's kind of wild. I didn't realize that before there was rated R movies, there was rated X.
Yeah.
Which is basically like the adults only rating for video games that basically kills your movie's chance of ever being seen.
So this was one of when I talk about this movie frightening me when I was a kid, I remember friends who had seen it and like had just heard from their parents, they'd be like, yeah, this movie was supposed to be rated X.
Yeah.
And like, that was one of those things like, oh shit, I didn't know there was a rated X movie. Like I didn't know that was a thing, and this movie's one of them. I would like
So-
die if I saw this film.
Yeah, there was a whole controversy that the studio behind The Exorcist was supposedly bribed the board so that it would get an R rating, because films that had come out before this that were by and large more tame films had gotten rated X. Like Midnight Cowboy was a movie that had gotten an X rating that, you know, wasn't nearly as disturbing as this. Like there's no kids masturbating with crucifixes in Midnight Cowboy, but somehow this movie got a less harsh rating, you know?
Now, apparently it was to do with sort of the level of violence, but the way that the rating came about is because the head of the board basically just went above the rest of them and got a copy of The Exorcist ahead of time, watched it, and then he basically himself was like, this is an important film, this deserves an R rating. And that's why there was so much controversy when people thought that Warner, the studio, bought off the board. It got released and it was huge. Like the budget was fairly low. It was like produced for 12 million, box office of almost $500 million. Which is the equivalent of like $1.3 billion today.
Yeah, $500,000. Yeah.
$500,000. What?
Yeah, the budget was 12 million. The box office was almost $500,000, which is the equivalent to like 1.3 billion today. Yeah.
Oh no, the box office was $500 million.
Yeah.
441 million.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's all right. And yeah, so the thing is that people obviously tried to ban it, like in
And the sick filth.
ban the sick filth.
Telling me the Christians didn't like this movie?
Protests, bro. Like major protests outside of
Yeah.
theaters. Like it was a huge deal. Which, like, also, if you get a group of like zealots to protest your film, that's really good news for your box office.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So more people
100%.
are gonna want to go and see it.
Yeah.
So in some places in America they tried to ban it, but the UK was like definitely protest there. It was banned in some counties. And some very entrepreneuring people would form Exorcist bus trips. So they would literally like rent a bus, put people on it, go take them to see the film. And then there was another sort of rating controversy with it in 1998. It had been available on VHS, and then they recalled all of them because the head of the classification board refused to give it an 18. And then he left, they resubmitted it, put it out in theaters, re-released it, and it was fine, and it was released uncut on VHS again in 1999. And it was because that guy had left. He just had a real he was really annoyed with that film apparently, and was like, no. But those who did see it in the cinemas in the 70s, I asked my mum and my uncle about this, and my mum was like, I didn't go see it. And my uncle, he says he remembers the stories, but he also didn't go see it. He read the book though. But like, all of these stories of people having nausea, fainting, some theaters had ambulances on standby, some gave everyone sick bags, which is basically just like telling people, you're kind of feeding into it, you're encouraging that. And yeah, there was a psychiatric journal based on the neurosis, cinematic neurosis that was triggered by the Exorcist film, which is quite cool. And speaking of the religious zealots not enjoying it, Linda Blair actually had to be under guard for about 6 months as a 12-year-old after the film came out, because they kept trying to attack her and blamed her for all this
And
attacks.
people that believe in religion need to just relax. Chill, bro. Like, please calm down. Don't bully kids just because you saw them be a demon on movies. Relax.
Yeah. But also, it's like, I mean, I remember reading about the stuff with regard to A Clockwork Orange and like gang stuff, particularly in the UK. But The Exorcist, I don't feel like there's been a real moral panic to a film like there was to The Exorcist.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that sticks out in that way. Maybe like something like Get Out or Us. Like I feel like Jordan Peterson. Oh my god, that's what we get for talking about Joe Rogan before. Jordan Peele's stuff might have some kind of that kind of energy, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But not anywhere
But-
close.
Yeah, I was
Like
gonna say,
this
but not
stuff.
like the outcry around it, you know?
Yeah.
When you mention like Exorcist bus where they'd go to other counties to watch it. The first thing I thought of, though, interestingly enough, is Passion of the Christ, because I remember churches
Oh.
would rent out movie theaters and take their entire, like, church group there just to see. Like, and that movie was fucking brutal.
Yeah.
I forgot about that movie, honestly. I also forgot that it's Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson directed it. Yeah.
Ugh. Not as intense. Michael R. O'Leary says, not as intense, but I had people protesting at the theater I worked at when Love, Simon came out.
Good lord.
What's Love, Simon?
I don't know
It-
what that is.
It wasn't it. It's about a young kid who's gay, right? Is
Yeah.
that what it is? And that's
Yeah.
why there's it's just stupid shit like that.
Oh, God.
I mean, stupid shit in terms of the people protesting.
Yeah. But more violent, but the churches love the passion. Don't go about Passion of the Christ.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we've got some Exorcist facts. It was the highest grossing R-rated horror movie for over 40 years.
That's right.
Until it was dethroned by It Chapter 1.
Ooh.
Remember how bad It Chapter 2 was?
I was
Oh
just
my
about to
God.
say, I am so sad about It Chapter 2.
I loved It Chapter 1, but It Chapter 2,
Yeah,
that movie
same.
sucks. Anyway.
Yeah. First horror movie nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. It didn't win, but it did win 2 other ones. It won Best Sound and Best Adapted Screenplay.
Boy named Matt in the chat says, I protested Dear Evan Hansen.
I can't bring myself to watch that. I've
No,
never seen it
absolutely
on
not.
stage, but
No.
the clips that I have seen of Dear Evan Hansen, no, I would have to be incredibly drunk. Yeah, Nano says, like, don't remind me of It Chapter 2.
It
I feel
chapter
like
one though.
I
Banger.
feel like it was
Solid.
a movie that we all watched and then all just as a society, because we live in a society, just decided to never
Boo.
talk about it.
Why?
They're filming
It's
Joker 2
it's
next year,
2022.
What?
Let it go.
Apparently, I don't know. I saw a thing
What?
on TikTok. It was actually inspired by a true story. The 1949 exorcism of Roland Doe. That is obviously a pseudonym because he was a child. And yeah, it involved the Catholic Church. It was, I think, one of only 3 exorcisms that the Catholic Church had deigned. Because I mean, if you've seen what do you call it, The Conjuring, you'll know that the Catholic Church doesn't just do it willy-nilly. They have to, and also in The Exorcist, they have to have a lot of proof before they'll kind of commit to doing an exorcism. And Friedkin, the director, was actually allowed to read the diaries of the priests who were involved in that exorcism in the 40s. It's a lot of it has kind of been a bit disproven. They think that Roland Doe was actually mentally disturbed. And a lot of the similar things that Reagan goes through, like the cuts and things, they believe that might have actually been self-inflicted. But yeah, apparently it was based on a true story. But one of the most interesting things, because like it's difficult for me to watch this and not see, you know, like Linda Blair in that role or Ellen Burstyn in that role. The people who were originally lined up or in consideration for the roles it's like quite incredible, and it's a real sliding doors. So directors wise, we ended up with William Friedkin, but it was Arthur Penn, Mike Nichols, and Kubrick. I can only imagine what Kubrick would have done with this movie. But yeah, they all turned it down. So for Father Merrin, instead of being Max von Sydow, it was Marlon Brando. Allegedly, the studio was really pushing for Marlon Brando, and the cast and the crew pushed back because they were like, no, because then it'll just be the Marlon Brando movie. So yeah, no Roland Doe, Ronaldo.
I had it in my head that Anthony Hopkins was in this movie. I think just because he's in similar movies, like he's been in
Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, I was just like, I feel like he's in this movie. I was like waiting for him, and then I looked it up and I'm like, oh no, he's not in this movie at all. I just dreamt that up apparently.
For Father Karras, Paul Newman was originally in the running, and so was Jack Nicholson.
Paul Newman would have been good. Jack Nicholson would have made this a very different film.
Well, apparently one of the reasons that Jack Nicholson was ultimately not chosen is because people couldn't believe that he would be like a good enough man to be a priest. Like he's I don't know.
Yeah,
He's got like
he
the
looks like he's
naughty
up to
look
some
behind
shit
it.
all
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
time.
he looks like he's the one that's possessed.
Yeah.
That's the problem. People will be like, does he need the exorcism?
Yeah.
Because like,
Very different
Yeah.
movie. And for Chris O'Neill, Anne Bancroft, Audrey Hepburn, and Jane Fonda. All,
oh.
There's some pretty interesting stories about both of those castings. Hepburn refused to, didn't want to do the part unless it was filmed in Rome because she had just moved to Rome. And Jane Fonda called it capitalist bullshit and said that she wasn't interested in participating.
Jane Fonda, what's wrong with you?
I know. God,
Well,
I mean,
it's also that's also a really interesting, like, casting either of those women in this role is really interesting because they're both famous actresses, and this is a character that's playing a famous actress. So
Famous
like,
actress,
it's really interesting to cast Ellen Burstyn in here because she wasn't a huge name. Like, she became a huge star because of this movie, but she wasn't a huge name before this movie.
no.
Yeah.
And for Reagan, Denise Nickerson, who played Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Chocolate Factory. She
Wow.
was asked to audition, but her parents read the script and went no. And also another famed horror actress, Jamie Lee Curtis was asked to audition for the role, but again,
Wow.
her parents read it and just went absolutely not. And then she would obviously find fame with another very famous horror franchise a few years later. With
Which one?
Halloween.
Oh, right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Linda Blair, who
I'll be right back.
people may not know, is known most for her role as Joni Witherspoon in S Club in LA.
I was looking through her IMDb and I was like, what the why is she in so many episodes of the
S Club 7 TV show? Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's such a wild coincidence. But speaking of Linda Blair and Ellen Burstyn, they both suffered quite heinous injuries from the stunt work. Obviously, a lot less safety oriented back then. And so yeah, those big harnesses that threw them around the room, like their screams in the movie in some scenes are actually their real screams because they were just chucked around.
Yeah.
And the actress who played Chris actually suffered from actual damage to her back.
There's a bit in the footage that Zach was showing earlier where Linda Blair's like doing the bed thing,
Mhm.
and then like she just like curls over in pain, and people like run up behind her, and I was like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, like obviously The Omen is the one where, you know, the safety standards on that movie were just not strong enough at all, and like people died and stuff. But even just like a regular stunt, so much going wrong for the two main actresses. It's wild. Max von Sydow was only 44. That's all makeup.
Wow. Yeah. The
And, like,
makeup prosthetics is real good.
Yeah, it's like it's so good, and I genuinely thought that man was like in his 70s.
Oh, we
when
talking
that
about
was-
makeup.
He died in
Yeah.
like 2020 too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, Max
Yeah.
von Sydow, he was 44, I think, when
Oh.
this film was made, and like, when you think of Max von Sydow, you only
I
think of
just
him
always
as an
thought of him
old
as an
man, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's largely in part due to this movie because that age makeup is so good.
Yeah, like when he popped up in Game of Thrones, I was like, Jesus, this man has just not aged in the last
Yeah.
40 odd years. But no, it was just the makeup that they used in The Exorcist.
What about in Star Wars?
Oh yeah,
The whole war.
that too. The
Do you think
demon's
when he's
voice-
annoyed at people, he gives people the Max von Sydow?
I knew that was coming. Oh my god. The demon's voice was made of a mix of bees,
Oh, you said beans.
dogs, hamsters, and pigs that were mixed together. I think my favorite bit of trivia from the movie, though, is that the vomit scene with Karis getting hit with the green goo. I wanted to wait until you're back to bring this one. It's pea soup. And he was told by the director that it would hit him in the chest, but actually, as you can see in the film, it hits him
Just
right
all
in
over the
mouth.
place. Yeah.
While he's got his mouth open, and that's why he looks so disgusted. And apparently, it's not. It's the soup brand they used is Anderson's. They did try Campbell's pea soup, but it just didn't work properly.
Anderson split pea soup. You got to go with that one.
Yep, you got her.
And finally, my final bit of trivia is to relate to the last episode that we did, Tam, did you realize that The Exorcist has such a strong link to Metal Gear?
Okay, yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Well,
Because
oh, boy.
the opening theme, Tubular Bells, is the debut album from one Mike
Mike
Oldfield.
Oldfield.
Standing.
Nuclear.
So there you go. So those are the Exorcist facts. I had a really fun time rewatching it, and like, if anyone wants to do some extra credit with me, I mentioned Mark Commode earlier, but in the late 90s, he did a well-regarded documentary called Fear of God, which friend of the show, Daniel Krupa, recommended. If you enjoy The Exorcist, and like I said, it's his favorite movie, and so Commode goes in deep on it, and it's on YouTube if you're not in the UK. So yeah, that's The Exorcist. How's everyone feeling? Does it still hold up?
Oh, yeah.
Do we induct it into the Lads on Tour Hall of Fame like we did for Fargo, was it?
And
Yeah,
Metal
Fargo.
Gear? I think
And
so.
Metal Gear.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Hey,
there's
we're on a perfect run then.
there's
Yeah.
no
3-0.
yeah.
there's no modern horror without this film. Like, horror
Yeah.
movies just don't exist in the way they are today without this movie. So yeah, I think so.
I think the only caveat might be if you don't like horror.
Right.
Might
Oh
be-
yeah, if you hate
Maybe
horror,
not.
then
But I think even if like you're uncomfortable around horror, but you're really interested in filmmaking, I think this movie would be a good one to watch. Just maybe watch it at like 1 p.m. like Lucy did yesterday.
or like stand really far away from your TV, so it's like the size
Yeah.
of a postage stamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can appreciate all the filmmaking from
Yeah, exactly.
that view.
As we move on to the next segment, people in the chat, I would love more recommendations for similar movies, religious horror kind of vibes, more recent stuff, because now I'm in the mood for it.
I said it before, and I'll say it again, but like, Hereditary
I've seen many.
Hereditary is the
I love
spiritual
that film
successor
so
to this
much.
film. Like, it's especially having, you know, like, thought back about this film as much as I have in the last few days. Like, there are so many comparisons that you can make to
Yeah.
Hereditary. So fucking good.
God. Oh,
So-
I want to watch Hereditary again.
I actually haven't seen this movie, but a friend of mine says The Exorcism of Emily Rose is actually pretty good. I know reviews at the time were pretty rough.
It was pretty
on
middling, yeah.
But I don't remember why he said it was good. But I was telling him I was watching this movie, and he was like, "At some point, you should check out Exorcism of Emily Rose because it has like interesting ideas or something." But
We
I don't know.
watched one last year that I didn't particularly love, but I know that a lot of people really liked him if you're looking for spiritual horror, and that's called Saint Maud.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Very slow.
it's a slow burn.
Matt Paget recommends The Exorcist 3, but I can't tell if that's a Matt Paget recommendation because it's good or because
He
it's
DM'd me on
absolute dog shit.
Discord.
Yeah, he
Just to tell me
DM'd
to
us on
watch it.
Discord to make sure that we knew
Yeah.
that The Exorcist 3 was good. So
It's hard
We've
to
got
say.
Midnight Mass. From
Yeah,
My
Midnight
Kid
Mass I've
Jack.
seen.
Yeah.
Dot
Yeah.
Rec, the original Spanish version.
Yeah, Rec
Prince
I've
of
seen.
Darkness. I would say, I mean, did you watch Ghost Stories? It's not
Yes.
Ooh,
I've
Ghost
seen
Stories is
possession,
good.
but that
Yeah.
film is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
The
it's
Last
good.
Exorcism, The Omen.
I've
Yeah.
not seen the Conjuring movie, so maybe I should try those.
if you've
They're
not
good.
seen,
They're
if
a
you've
little
not,
bit more like
if you're
Yeah.
looking for a horror movie that is like influential or sort of in a similar vibe, I would also recommend Rosemary's Baby if you haven't seen it. It's like such a
I've seen
weird,
Rosemary's Baby.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
psychedelic horror. Like, I really like it.
Rosemary's Baby messed me up when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But then again, I just was watching horror films that I absolutely should not have done as a
He
kid.
has his father's eyes.
Yeah, Tamoor, if you haven't seen the Conjuring movies, I'd give those a shot. I think one is
I've still never
one
seen
is
those.
really good.
Yeah.
I'd say it does kind of go off the rails, especially compared to like
Yeah.
it lacks a bit of subtlety at the
But
end.
and it's all about like the Ed and Lorraine Warren,
Yeah,
like the married couple who never fight or anything.
the more those films have gone on, the schlockier they've been, and like I personally enjoy that. I think it's fun, but like I think good horror. I think like the first Conjuring is pretty good and worth a watch, and then from there on, it just kind of goes
Yeah.
off the rails.
Last one
That's
for
so
me
fun.
is Veronica, which is a Spanish horror film from 2017 that's on Netflix. That's very good. It's also very rooted in Catholicism and spooky. Yeah.
I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. It's not necessarily possession, but Thirst is Korean, and it's very Catholic focused.
Isn't there a movie called Possessor?
Yeah.
That's so good.
Possessor's
Cronenberg's son.
yeah, that's David Cronenberg's son, and that is a banger of a movie. It's not
Yeah.
like spiritual, but like if you've not seen that movie, Tam, you specifically will love that movie. It's a banger.
It's on Hulu. Zach and I watched it last year, and we didn't really know what to. All I heard was I think Patrick Klepek, which is like Patrick Klepek, Luce O'Brien, Daniel Krupa. They're kind of like barometers for horror. And when they are all posting about like one movie, I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this, and I'm so glad we did. We've also got from the chat, we've got Michael R. O'Leary says, I think Insidious is a little bit less ham-fisted than The Conjuring. Yeah, I'd agree.
The first Insidious.
Marianne from Casino. It's a Netflix series. Jinpei. I love that Elvis Costello song. And yeah.
Constantine.
What a film! What a film!
A friend of mine watched that again a couple weeks ago and was like, "This holds up weirdly well."
I like the original.
Yeah, I liked it
Constantine.
originally. I've been wanting to see it again because
Yeah.
I have had that same question many times lately.
Right then, let's move into weekly recommendations.
Yeah.
Zach, what are you recommending folks watch or play or listen to?
So, I've been playing a game that it kind of flew under the radar. I'm not sure that like a lot of people have been hip to it, but really cool game. It's called Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Tam, you ever heard of this game? It's pretty good. I think you'd like it.
Sounds like an indie game that I would not be into.
So here's the thing about Sekiro. I love From Software, and I've played the majority of the known From Software games, and Sekiro has vexed me from the time that it came out because it's the only one that I haven't finished. I've told this story before, but the final boss in this game I fought for so long, and I was so furious that I broke a controller, and I've never finished it. And a friend of the show, Alana Pierce, and I were talking about how good this game was last week, and she was giving me a lot of shit for finishing it. So one night I was like, you know what? I'm going to give Sekiro another shot and just kind of turn my brain off and see like how I feel playing it. And I have smashed through the majority of the game in 2 days. And I think this time playing it, I'm like, is this FromSoft's best game? I can't tell. Between this and Bloodborne, it's hard, but this game is incredible. And Tam, you and I were talking about this is the IGN review, but Tam, you and I were talking about it last night. But like, this game is very different in the From Software oeuvre because it's really the only FromSoft game where you have to get good. Like in Dark Souls, in Bloodborne, you can go and level up and grind and come back and fight with increased stats. You have to be good at this game. You have to learn how to play this game correctly, or else you'll just get your ass handed to you. And there's something I really love about that kind of challenge. So yeah, I've been playing Sekiro like it's going out of style, kind of in preparation for Elden Ring. So love it.
Boy named Matt in the chat said Sekiro. I'll wait for the American remake. I don't like subtitles.
Very good.
And then Jinpei says the Awesome Games done a quick run of Sekiro is stupidly impressive. If a 2-hour run doesn't impress you, the blindfold player will. Yeah.
Go ahead,
absolutely.
Lucy. Plug your shit.
Jinpei, I'm literally getting you the link.
Go ahead.
Tam and I spoke to that speedrunner on
Matrix.
Matrix on Monday, and we edited together this video of him reacting to that run and actually talking about how you actually get to the point where you can play that game blindfolded, and it's incredible. Man uses echolocation. He beats bosses with such ease that took me like hours, and so it's wild. It was so fun to talk to him, and I'm getting like, if February wasn't going to be so busy for us, like work-wise, like Horizon, Dying Light, and then of course obviously Elden Ring, I would probably be joining you and picking up Sekiro again at this point.
Nano in the
here's
chat
the thing,
says Sekiro
Lucy.
not even once.
You've beaten Sekiro before, right?
No, I got stuck.
Oh, okay. Because I feel like a lot of people do what Zach did, where they get to the end, they get to that boss, and it's such a hard wall
It's
that you
so
hit,
hard.
that a lot of people stop. And then when they come back to and replay, they realize that like when they know the mechanics of this game from the start, you can burn through it so
yeah.
fast. It's so satisfying to just rip through enemies that you spent hours on, literal hours on, and you're just like, oh, what's that? Fuck you, and you just knock them out, move on to the next. But
so I was
you-
talking to
you should
Tam
do it at
about
some point.
I was talking to Tam about this because like I've played up to and through Genichiro like multiple times, a dozen times probably. But I typically drop off after that point. And Genichiro is that first wall where I hit where I'm like, am I gonna keep playing this or am I gonna stop here? And this time around, I only fought him for like 30 minutes before I beat him, and I was like, okay, let's go. Like this might be the run. Like this might be it. So we'll see.
I almost gave up on Genichiro. I remember
Dude.
texting Tamoor being like, I don't think this is for me. And he's like, no, you just got to do it. You just got to do it. He's like, I cried when I beat Genichiro. Like it took me a long time. And I was like, all right.
Now
And
it takes me literally a minute to beat him.
Yeah,
which is
Lucy and
insane.
Lucy and I had just started dating when this game came out, and I was playing that boss at her house in her apartment like for 2 hours probably, and was like literally having a fit about it. And I'm just so surprised that she continued to date me after just screaming and stomping and jumping around fighting that boss. So,
And you didn't even beat him, so
yes, I did.
He did. I remember Genichiro wasn't not really that hard for me. I lucked out.
Pro gamer.
Though.
Oh, look out.
No. I lucked out but then I got so stuck on a different boss who I'm not gonna say in case of spoilers, in case anyone hasn't beat them yet. And I just was like, okay, down. But the reason, honestly, I genuinely think, and it's Jake, it's to your point, when you said like once you know how the game works, you can blast through the opening. I got a weird bug. And my PlayStation like deleted my save, and so I had to restart all over again. And then I got through that opening area with like such ease, and it gave me this real confidence. And I just, did most of the game, and then
It's like Bloodborne for me.
That confidence can carry you far too.
Yeah.
Like,
Jake, what do you recommend for folks?
I don't know if this is well.
I was gonna say we were talking about this before. And I was like,
since we're talking horror, I watched Archive 81 on Netflix, which I enjoyed the premise, I enjoyed the story, but my God, those characters are so uninteresting. Every single one was just like
this is such a weird segment because this is supposed to be recommendations, and you're like, here's this show. It was not very good, but
the thing is, I watched the whole thing. I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed watching it. I just have it's a Netflix show, right? Like there are aspects that are really good, but there are aspects that are really bad, and that's always so present in Netflix shows. They're so easy to nitpick, for me at least. Like anyway, if you want more horror, it like almost kind of flirts with some cosmic horror too, which I thought was kind of cool. It didn't really go in as much as I hoped, but it is what it is. But it asked a lot of interesting questions. Probably the cooler thing I watched all of Yellow Jackets, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
So that you should prioritize over this. But if you've already seen Yellow Jackets and you want more horror, maybe this, maybe not. Who knows?
I watched the first.
I finished it.
Yeah, I watched the first 3 episodes, and then based on you and Lucy and a couple other people that have watched it, I don't think I'm gonna keep up with it. But
I was texting Andrew Goldfarb throughout because he and I watched it at pretty much the same time, and it's like it's very watchable.
It's a Netflix show.
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
there it is.
The first scene and last scene of each episode, like that's the most important part.
And like I found it just incredibly uneven, and just by the end it kind of fell apart a little bit for me. But I mean, I watched the whole thing, so what do I know? Tam, what about you? What are you recommending?
In light of next week's 2 weeks episodes being a musical thing, we are listening to Radiohead. Oh, is it okay, computer?
Yep.
For the next episode of this show, I've got some music. 2 albums. I've got one which is from a band called Bad Flower that I like a lot. I'm not usually into like well, I don't actively seek out rock music. I like prefer the classical stuff, like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin era, that kind of stuff. So like new bands or relatively recent bands are a rarity for me. But Bad Flower is one that I kind of randomly stumbled across. They had a song called Ghost that I really, really liked. And then I listened to their album, which I think is called Okay, I'm Sick, which is 2019 album. And it's really good. I described it as having like early 2000s era kind of emo rock album energy, but it's actually hard rock. The lyrics, Jake rightly pointed out, are very emo, but the actual sound is very hard rock. And I had a good time listening to it. I think like I don't know if they're like super big. I'm not paying close attention to the rock side of the music world, but I don't know if they're massive or it doesn't seem like it. But I really enjoyed that album and some of their other work as well. And then the other album I'm gonna recommend is I'm obsessed with Carly Rae Jepsen's Dedicated.
Yeah.
I've talked about this like many times before on Twitter, but like she's got Dedicated and Dedicated Side B, and they're both really good. But Dedicated, the original album, is so fucking good. It's so listenable, like endlessly listenable. I've been like getting into like pop stuff. I know everyone has their pop divas that they love, and it's always like Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift. And I don't like, for me, like recently I feel like one for me a high is like Ariana Grande, who gets enough of that respect and love. I think like she's amazing, but like Carly Rae's not getting the respect that she deserves. She's
I agree. She's underrated.
Fucking massively I prefer her to Taylor Swift, to all these other divas like Lady Gaga's. Like I feel like one is her underdog story, kind of like her. She got treated like as a bit of a joke, but her music is so good, especially those two albums. I love those albums.
Slap.
Yeah, so those are my recommendations.
Hell yeah. Also with Carly Rae Jepsen, I think Charlie XCX makes a lot of like bangers, but I've been listening to her a lot more recently. I'm like, oh god, all of this. Is
Grimes is also back, and let me tell you, that music is not good.
No.
Oh, what is it, Gamer Boy? Or that
Gamer
song
Boy
they did
and
about
the
Gamer
Shinigami
Boy?
eyes, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I think you might have lost it, man.
And for me, my recommendation is Peacemaker, which is the show about the DC villain. Like if you saw last year's Suicide Squad, James Gunn kind of got bored in the middle of the pandemic and was like, I'm just gonna write a whole TV show about this one character. John Cena, like the whole thing is incredibly funny, but John Cena is so funny in it. I don't know what I expected. Like Zach, you and I were talking about this, and I was like, yes, I'm burnt out on superheroes. I said that after Spider-Man came out, and I was like, it didn't land for me as much. I think I'm just burnt out on the superhero stuff. But I loved Suicide Squad last year, and I didn't expect to love a spin-off based on that character as much. And it is such a refreshing take. It's very foul-mouthed, like they're dropping hard C's at points. It's very violent. The jokes that he gets away with making, like
it's very James Gunn. Right? Like,
it's very James Gunn. And I'm so glad that he is there because like it's difficult to imagine who else could make a show that's as well put together as this. And we were talking about this before we went live, but Tam was mentioning like just the D tier level like DC heroes and villains that they're name dropping. And like yes, there's references to Superman and Batman, but it's like they are not the main players in this world, and they absolutely don't need to be. It's a very fun like cutting commentary. The fact that Peacemaker, all of his shit, he gets all of his information from Facebook.
Yeah.
And, like every time they argue with him, and he's like, "Well, I read," and it's it's really funny, and it's on HBO. Like they released the first 3 episodes at once, and so there's a good amount to kind of binge. But it's great. Batman says, I can't see the main actor. Yeah, it's just half of it is just empty. And also the opening number is them doing this big dance thing.
Yeah, I had the opening up as B-roll because like for the understanding of what the tone is of that show, like the opening sequence is such a perfect like tone set because it's so wacky. And the thing about this show is like it's just so much better than it has any business being. Like for just another superhero show, it's so funny. It knows exactly what it's doing. Like at one point there's a sex scene in the first episode and Peacemaker is just going ham and he just screams freedom. It's like it's so stupid. I love it. Like
Also,
I
there's
wasn't
this
expecting to.
CGI eagle.
Yeah, I wasn't
Oh,
expecting to be
Eagly!
as into it as I am for sure. Yeah.
It's like it's the thing that I'm genuinely just like super excited to watch every week.
Yeah.
So I couldn't recommend it more. I don't think it has a distribution in the UK yet, which absolutely sucks, and I hope they sort that out very soon. Well, that was this week's episode of Lads on Tour. I think we're all aligned that The Exorcist is firmly going down in firmly a banger, and we love it. But in 2 weeks' time, on the 13th of February, we're going to be talking about Radiohead's seminal classic.
Let's go!
Okay, Computer.
It's Jake's time to shine, Zach's time to shine, my time to semi-shine. I bow down to you two when it comes to sort of like being fans of Radiohead. Tam, I'm very excited for you. So we hope you'll join us then. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Lucy James Games. Jake.
I'm at Jacob Deck.
Tam.
I'm at Tamoor H.
Zach.
I'm at Zacharias D on Twitter and Twitch. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays on Twitch.
Yes, oh, I was gonna say we all stream too, but if you're watching on Twitch, all the links should be below. And everyone's pretty great at keeping the old schedules and stuff updated. Jake, you gonna be streaming tomorrow?
Yes, normally I stream Monday morning Smash, but now that Pokemon's out, that's all I've been playing. So I think tomorrow I will probably stream some Pokemon on the Lads on Tour channel, so we can hopefully
Hey, nice.
so we can hopefully hit affiliate.
Nice. Right on.
7 a.m. baby, you're up that
Be
early.
here.
Yeah,
you
you're
go.
welcome to join.
I can dig
7
it.
a.m. So thank you everyone who has been watching and commenting along as we've been going, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Do you guys want to do a raid, or should we just cut it?
Hang on one second. Who's up?
Let's
Who's-
see who's up. and
Who's streaming?
Yeah, so it will be on in 2 weeks' time, at 12 p.m.
PST.
PT,
Yeah.
and that's 8 p.m. in the UK. Tomorrow morning, Jake is going to be 7 a.m. Pacific as well.
Tam, who are we raiding?
I'm not seeing anyone that I know on my friends list streaming, so we're not rating anyone.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right, then we're
All
gonna
right,
call it
see you.
here.
Right there.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks everyone.
Bye, y'all.